Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Pit Against, a live Flesh and Blood call-in show. I'm joined by my constant co-host, Kevin Smurf Murphy. Kevin, what's up?
Not much. Chilling. Ready for Hartford tomorrow?
Heck yeah. I'm excited for Hartford. I'm not even going. The Pit Against is a live call-in show, and if you'd like to be on air talking to us right now, about your take, whatever it may be, whatever kind of hot take you got, join the Pit Against Discord by clicking in the link in the description that Kevin has just now put in the YouTube and Twitch chat. Thank you, Kevin. Then join the waiting room channel, and we'll put your hot take in the topics channel. We'll pull you on, put you for a mic check, pull you on air, see how you're doing. Thank you, Kevin, for putting that in. Did you put in the YouTube one too?
Yeah.
Okay.
What?
It didn't show up for me on the YouTube one. Maybe it's on a delay or something. I don't know.
That's weird.
First, the topic everyone's talking about right now. Tier lists. We're heading into Hartford and everyone's like on edge, you know, without revealing too much.
Calling.
Yeah, a sealed calling, and everyone's
limited.
excited. Everyone's excited about the CC
Everyone's
tier
making
list.
their tier list for the battle hardened.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, so I'm actually going to start us out with my tier list because I have a tier list for this. All right, so let me bring it up real quickly.
Can I get a visual?
You'll get a visual. It'll be on stream for you. All right, you ready for this? Boom. This is my tier list. All right, let me walk you through it.
I'm waiting. Oh.
Let me walk you through it. S tier, Dromai. A tier, almost everyone. B tier, Arachne, Max, who's not listed, and Teklevossen. And then in HH tier is the 5 new heavy hitters heroes.
And then LL tier not listed.
I know exactly a thing or two about
Sitting in the corner on the bench.
Yes. So let me tell you why this is my tier list.
Is one of the heroes in this tier list actually not legal to play?
Wait, which one?
Lex.
Oh, frick. Yeah, get out of here. This is an adaptable tier list. I can make this. Also, right and left doesn't matter. So let me explain.
Right, in no particular order.
In no particular order, but the tiers definitely matter. So let me go into my reasoning why this is my tier list. It's because on Fabrary, they have stats, and I'm just looking at. I'm looking at January. Was it January?
It was January yesterday.
Yeah. January stats. Dromai on Talishar had a 58% win rate, so she's an S tier. Almost everyone had between 55 and 45. And then Arachne was at 45. Max was at 41. Teklevossen was at 39. So that's my tier list. My tier list is how good was it on Talishar, which I think is a good... I think it's a good parallel to like day one at an event because you don't know what you're going to run up against or the skill level of the person.
That's true.
So, Battle Hardened is only a one-day event. It's the perfect tier list.
And it's day 3 of the set when nobody has any data because there's no other CC events.
The only data they have is the stuff that I'm privy to on Fabrary, right? This is the perfect tier list.
Yeah.
I'm glad everyone agrees.
Wait, there wasn't a Max on this list, right?
No, Max is in B tier. There's no Max image.
There's no Max picture.
There's no Max picture, but he would be in B tier.
Okay.
Viserai and Vincent in A, that's acceptable, but preferred S. Yeah. I think you only like that because every other tier list didn't have them in A.
This tier list has more logic behind it than I think most of the others I've seen.
I really appreciate that. Oh my gosh.
Like, your logic is at least consistent.
That's all I want out of a tier list is semi-consistent logic. All right, let's bring it back to our faces. That was it for that. Holy frick.
How do we know if he doesn't have a picture? You're right.
You know, I don't think Max exists, and I think the tier list proves it. It's not a real deck.
Max isn't real. The mech can't hurt you.
Maybe he LL'd, we didn't know it. He just disappeared one day. All right. So you had a hot topic. A hot topic of conversation.
I've been asked by too many people how Dromai's going to do in the heavy hitters metagame with them adding all of these poppers to the card pool and the hero pool. My answer is the heck insane. She's had plans for Guardian forever.
So
she's had plans for Brute forever.
So Guardian only got
don't take Dromai to a tournament unless you have a plan for Levia, unless you have a plan for Bravo.
So
nothing freaking changes.
True.
Get popped? Yes, we know that's going to happen. We have plans for that.
So
we play knowing that's going to happen.
So let's see. Brute got more poppers to put in their deck, like yellow 6s, but they didn't get any more like blue 6s.
Correct.
So like there are, but I feel like all those yellow 6s are not going to replace like yellow 5s or non-attack actions,
because there weren't yellow 5s in the deck.
Yeah. So like it's not actually affecting the number of poppers in a Brute deck.
You're also still, one, also because they like KO's text is also phenomenal. Like it's phenomenally written still. And you don't get to run more than 60 cards, or you're not going to run more than 60 cards. You don't get to put more than 80 in your deck list. You're not running 100 poppers for Dromai and then 20 sideboard cards for everything else.
Yeah, you only have so much space.
You don't get to actually have more poppers. In fact, I'm pretty sure KO might actually have less poppers than the other Brutes, because he's running the yellow 5s.
Yeah, or the blue 5s.
And then red Pulping, red Wild Ride, and red Bearfangs aren't poppers. You put 9 red 6s in your deck that aren't actually poppers.
That's funny. I think that's funny.
80 cards, all poppers, no equipment. Bring it. Let's go.
Lose to
I will run it over as an illusionist.
You do have alternative ways to handle those decks. I mean, so Guardian might have
called attack actions.
3 more poppers in the fact that they're going to be playing Thunk, probably blue Thunk.
Do they not? I thought they got 2 sets of blue 6s.
No,
they only got 1.
So the combination of Thunk and Wallop. Thunk is a 5 cost, 8 attack, 3 block. Wallop is a 4 cost, 7 attack, 3 block.
That one didn't. So
the Vigor one,
not.
The Vigor one is not 5 cost. Thunk is 5 cost. Yeah. Lucas.
Okay.
So, but your point still stands. It's not about the amount of poppers. It's about the game plan.
Yeah.
And more poppers don't affect the fact that you have a game plan into these decks. Other decks. Okay. Does it? Ooh.
It's not even more poppers.
Is it more poppers though for Warrior?
Potentially.
Ooh. Yeah.
Olympia's going to. This is the one exception that I made. Was that Warrior got some poppers they actually might want to run, and that's Wage Agility.
Yeah.
And Wage Gold.
And Kasai could run Intellect. Nourishing Emptiness. Yes.
But like. Yeah. Okay.
Kasai has 3
Warrior's
poppers.
Still,
or I guess she could run more, right? Because she can just
get rid of stuff more, like but she needs enough
CNC
yellows to clear all of those out to keep the Nourishings alive if she's doing that plan.
So you run Yellow Findle's Fighting Spirit as well. You just go full attack action Kasai.
That's what you do in Limited.
That's interesting.
For both them.
That's kind of interesting.
I still think those decks don't clear dragons well enough for a popper to matter.
So is Dromai the best deck in the format? Was my tier list correct?
You have a weird sort of triangle
Okay.
kind of going on. You have aggro decks, which are like it's not even necessarily a triangle because like KO and Brute is going to be KO and Levi are going to be extremely aggressive right now, and they're going to do well. They're going to do fine into Dromai. Dromai can deal with it, but it's probably the weakest matchup she has. It hasn't changed though. Levi is still Levi. It's the same. They're going to do better into Big Dragon than they are into Redline. That's also still the same. That's the way it was before. They're going to do all right into Guardian. KO's probably going to might struggle a little bit just because he has no blocks. But Brute has a heckin' fridge now.
Mega fridge.
Leviah gets Bonebreaker plus Husk plus Fleshbag plus Scabs. How much health does she start at? Like
1 million. Well, I mean, does
she starts at 54?
So does her health total matter? Like it does, but it doesn't, right? Because she like has the opportunity to lose to herself or whatever.
Yes, she can, but if you are taking Leviah to a tournament, you probably are like to a Battle Hardened Plus. You probably know how to play around the demi hero well enough that you are very unlikely to just lose to yourself.
Okay. That's interesting. I need to talk to somebody who knows a lot about Leviah so I can like understand how she feels positioned post
heavy hitters.
Post heavy hitters, yeah.
I believe Mansan just like straight up has a video about it.
I might watch it. Already. Actually, that actually sounds great. I'm gonna watch that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch it right now if you want to grab a caller. How long's the video? Like 30 seconds? It's like a short, right? Like a TikTok?
No. I do want to actually answer Goblin Reserve's question real quick.
Okay.
Who came up with fridge? I believe that's a very old term from the game, like way back when it was still like in crew era, where if you would sit down across from somebody and all of their stuff was cold foil, so it was all like and it all reflected at you. It was like you opened the fridge at night and it blinded you as they turned their equipment suite over.
Or it's just like cold foil. And then they're also probably in cases, right? And so you got the big blocky card in plastic.
And the slabs are a little reflective. Yeah,
I can see it.
It would be like they flip over bolters and courage and Brave Forge bracers and like cold foil skull cap, and that was a fridge.
That sounds like a term like a New Zealander or an Aussie came up with. Like,
probably.
I don't think that was an Americanism, but I'm interested who said it first. I wonder who said it first.
That is my understanding. I don't know if it's 100% correct or accurate.
It sounds right. I believe it.
Yeah.
And so it is now canon.
Cool.
All right.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah, go get him. All right. So I am going to. Whoa. Okay. So I am going to read out the fact that we got. Last week, we got a follow from Fab Chaos on Twitch, Dead Summer Art 49 seconds ago, and I think that's it. So we got 2 new follows. That's kind of cool. Thank you guys so much for following us. Any amount of attention we get always feels great. And if you actually want to be on the show tonight, we don't have anyone, sitting in the background. If you want to be on talking to us about a hot take or an opinion you have about Flesh and Blood, you can join our Discord, which the link should be in chat. If it's not, let me know. I'll put it in chat. And we're always excited to have people on. Speaking of that, we have a caller. Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from?
My name is Cindy. I'm calling from Colombia.
Yo,
Kale from Dead Summer Art. What's going on?
What's going on? All right. What do you want to talk about on the show?
All right. I'll talk about the initial thing that I wrote on Twitter, which was people who complain about heroes don't do enough to actively counter them and change their decks. They just keep their decks the same and then go, why is Lexi beating me up? There are so many cards that LSS has printed. I went through and I got a list of cards just in the generic class category that are actively designed to be counters to certain strategies. So I don't know if you want me to, but I can go through a list of cards I've got.
Right before you do that, I do want to ask: is this a hot take or is this like something just people just an unknown that people just aren't thinking about?
I would say this is a hot take.
Okay, all right.
Because a lot of people go, "Oh, this hero actively is way too strong."
Yeah, Lexi sucks. But I hate playing against her.
I think people just don't do enough to actively like go against certain strategies and change their deck. They're just very one-minded. They're like, my deck does this and I'm not going to change.
Ooh, that's interesting. Go ahead and tell us about those cards you were talking about.
All right. I have a list of cards here that people should consider. Amulet of Echoes. I know it's an amulet. I'm going to have a couple amulets and talismans on this list. I know they're not necessarily good, but they can be. This one discards 2 cards from your opponent's hand if they've played 2 or more cards of the same name.
What? What?
Yeah.
Huh.
It's an amulet, so, you know.
Interesting. Okay.
Cards like Burden of the Past stops people from playing D-Reacts if they have the same name as one already in the graveyard.
I hate that card, yeah.
You got Censor, so you can name a card, they can't play it. You've got Chains of Eminence, they can't play, pitch, or defend with the name card. Obviously, we got CNC, stops D-Reacts, blows up Arsenal. Drone of Brutality, good against Fatigue. Erase Face, lose all class and talent. Do Confidence, you can't play Instance if defending card's power doesn't equal or is greater than the card's attack. Hack to Reality, destroy token, non-token auras. Hold the Line, block 2, pitch 3, 0 cost defense reaction that also prevents 3 if they've drawn 2 or more cards. 3 of a kind. Humble, hero loses all abilities, so you can turn off Dromire's ability. It's really funny if you hit a Leviathan with that. I've done that before and killed them. Imperial Warhorn, destroy an ally, aura, item, or landmark an opponent controls, and if you're royal, you get to choose it. So you're playing like Royal Viceroy. Last Ditch Effort is good defense against fatigue. Nasty Surprise, which we got in heavy hitters. Protection against mill or discard, because if it goes into the graveyard from an opponent's effect, you get to make a Might, Agility, and Vigor token. Poison the Well, counters large life gain from cards such as Tome of Fiendol. Ripple Away can make it so your opponents create 1 less token per action card, which is really good against certain decks. Talisman of Creation, if you play a card from Banish, you can then banish all of a named card from an opponent's graveyard. So
oh my
stops
gosh.
recursion. Talisman of Tides, if an opponent would draw a card, instead you destroy the talisman and they draw that many -1.
I love that card in Guinness. That card's so good. I love it.
Oh, damn, that's some good tech. I need to use that.
No, it's so good, right? So like, like, you know how you can like CNC pummel with only 3 cards and a tunic? If you have that on the field and your opponent chooses not to sink when you activate Guinness's effect, Guinness's effect costs 2. If you draw a blue, then you end up having the floating resource, and then you can pitch that card you just drew. It's a dumb combo, but basically Guinness with that card on the field can effectively act like a CNC pummel with only 3 cards. It's very silly, but I love that card. I love that card.
What else we got? Talisman of Warfare, a classic. Destroy all arsenals.
That is a good card.
Exactly 2 damage. We got a new card, Tenacity. So if they start fridging, like you guys have been talking about, it gets +X, where X is the amount of defending cards on the chain. Although you kind of have to force them to Warner block. This round's on me. Give all attacks -1. So really good against like go wide. What else we got? Warmonger's Diplomacy, obviously the big one. Stops attacks and non-attacks on the same turn. We've got Wreck Havoc, which is like a mini CNC. It stops D-Reacts from Arsenal and destroys them if you hit them. So that's just generic. Like, each class has extra tools to actively counter certain strategies. So many people just go, nah, my deck's doing this. I'm just going to try, like, outrace them, or my strategy's going to come online earlier, so I'll just blow them out the water. And then when that doesn't work and they get screwed over because a hero's really good against their strategy, they just complain on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. People just got to, like, like LSS is giving us tools here. We got to look at all the tools. You can't just, be in one lane of traffic.
I think bringing up all these generic cards is also interesting because, if you talk about, you think about Brute, one of their kind of characteristics in Brute is that they destroy items. And that might be something people are already thinking about, but they might not think about other cards, other generic cards that can also do other things, right? Because you might know what your class is good into, but you might not necessarily think right off the bat that you can affect the game in different ways with generics. Like almost like what's a term, like in Magic when a red card does something like very blue, it's like, I think it's called like color shifting or something like that.
Oh, it breaks the color pie.
Yeah. And so in a way, the generics can sometimes kind of break the color pie in that sense. Like if you have like Meeps messes with items, that's kind of a Brute thing to mess with items, or Caloria thing. So, it's every class can kind of do it.
Yeah, sure. I guess another thing I wanted to talk about, which is, I don't know if it's a hot take, but because I'm the lore guy, I see a lot of lore theories, and I feel like a lot of people have really bad reading comprehension and make some of the silliest theories ever.
Me. All right. Wait, let's hold on to that one. Wait, let's go. Kevin, did you have a point on what he said? On his hot take? Like a rebuttal?
First one, I don't think it's a hot take. I think it's just like,
damn.
Yeah, people are going to complain, but the people you hear complaining also aren't typically the top players. Where
true,
like you'll hear top players say like, this is just the best deck and that's it. But the top players who are actually doing well are the ones who are actively working to play against it. Like,
for sure. Yeah.
The people who, like, everyone knew Lexi was the best deck going into Baltimore. Like, the people who were prepared to play against Lexi were the ones who succeeded. They were the ones who did well. Like, Michael Fang was prepared to play against Lexi and took Oldhim, who he said had 45% win rates across the board.
Was he prepared? I heard an interview where he was like, "Nah, I'm just gonna play."
He was prepared to play against Lexi. He was not, and he had accepted what his win rate was going to be.
Night of, he was playing. Yes. From what I heard, he was going to play Lexi, and then he and Brody swapped decks.
Yes, because he was better prepared to play against Lexi as Oldhim
than to play Lexi into Oldhim or the mirror,
he had been
or something
playing
like that.
Yeah,
so
okay. Or Lexi into Lexi.
Yeah, yeah.
And then like Mara's run, her deck was built and tuned and sideboarded very specifically for Lexi. That was a matchup that we tested the entire week leading up to it, and there were like 3 different iterations of that strategy of how to play against Lexi. Like, the people who are complaining about these decks aren't doing anything about it because they're just sitting there and they'd rather complain. And they don't want it. They just want the wins. They don't want to earn them. Like, I don't think it's a hot take that like people do this. Like,
yep.
This is just
It is
kind of a thing.
It is a burn, which I love.
Work for it.
All right. Yep. So I actually have a rebuttal to this take. So you mentioned that if let's say I'm playing I'm trying to think. Give me one of the. Well, how do I put this? So let's say I'm playing
just like a good hero.
Let's say I'm playing Max. Let's say I'm playing a bad hero. Let's say I'm playing Max. According to my tier list.
That's a hot take.
Yeah. Let's say I'm playing Max. He's low on my tier list. Thank you, Fabry. So C tier Max. Because I'm playing him, I'm not going to be able to put in any of those cards, right? If I banish a single generic off the top of my deck, then I can't maintain hyperdrivers, which means if I was to draw it next turn, then I might not have, draw the mech next turn, I might not be able to play it because of his gameplay loop with the mech in CC. For that reason, I can only work within the boundaries of Mechanologist, which definitely has limitations, which means I'm probably not going to be prepared, or I can't prepare myself into certain strategies. And then I have according to you, I have the full right to complain legally on Twitter, verified, It'll say Twitter verified complaint because I'm playing Dax. Max. Whatever. He's not on my tier list. Oh frick! Yeah, true. Max isn't on my tier list. They didn't have an image for it.
I would counter that argument to an extent by saying
listening.
that there are mechanologist decks that run generics and have the chance at whiffing on their boosts anyway. Was it Turtle Dash, whatever you call it, or Jump Frog Dash, whatever it's called?
Tree Frog.
Tree Frog. Yeah, Tree Frog Dash. She runs like unmovables and sinks, right?
Yeah, but does Max?
Yes, and they are not boosting that often. They're almost never boosting. They're putting almost entirely all of their damage out through the gun, through the pistol.
So
It's just like an American.
So,
Not a hot take. Go ahead.
Not a hot take.
so I guess in that regard, then not only is it your deck list that needs to change, but perhaps a strategy when versing certain heroes might also change. So if you're versing heroes where you have to sideboard in generics, maybe you also have to swap your game style, your play style, to be less reliant on those boosts and more of, if I hit it, I hit it, but it's not gonna like make or break my turn.
And then at that point, you realize you can't do that in Max without sacrificing your game plan, and then you switch to a different hero. I got it. I like it. This is wisdom. Wisdom. I get it. All right, we're on the same page. All right, the next one.
Stop complaining. Change decks.
Yeah. Change decks, or at least change. Like most classes have 2 heroes. You can switch between heroes, right? Like
I'd say Mechanologist is probably like your best example of a class that doesn't wanna, like, it's very parasitic in itself.
I mean, like, if Max isn't working out, you got 3 other options. I know the two other ones are also not working out, but like one of them works. I'm not gonna say which.
One of them's good. One of them's okay. And
I'm just kidding. They're like two mechanologists are in my C tier, so clearly it's a terrible class if half of them are in C tier.
True.
2 of them are in A tier. That's almost S tier.
That's like
everything's
saying
in
C tier is almost B tier, which is almost A tier, which is almost S tier.
You know what? LL is almost F tier, which is almost D tier, which means if I brought Oldham to a tournament, there's a chance.
D tier for disqualified.
D tier. What was I gonna say? Your second take, where you were insulting me. What was it again?
Okay, a lot of people have bad reading comprehension with the lore and come up with the absolute most unlikely theories known to man.
That's interesting. I have bad reading comprehension in general. Okay, all right. What's a theory, or like give me elaborate on this?
Okay, I've seen one recently where someone was like, Viserai is Kasai's father, who quote unquote died. I was like, no. So their reasoning
Where'd you read this? Reddit?
Nah, Discord.
Oh, frick.
Which is about as bad as Reddit, to be honest.
Holy frick.
So their reasoning, or some of these people's reasoning, was Kasai's dad is a decorated general from Volcor.
Okay.
And Viserai's story on the website specifically calls him a decorated warrior from Volcor.
Oh my gosh, so he is her dad. I knew it. That's why I said that in my alternative Discord account.
So,
dang it.
But just like, whilst it's probable, it is highly unlikely. But these people are saying these theories as if it's like, oh yeah, it's pretty likely that it's the case.
It's not just a theory; it's a fab theory.
Fab theory.
I love it.
Yeah, and then I've got some others. Look, I'm gonna.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna talk smack on a content creator friend of mine, Bronson. I love you to death, Bronson, but I do not think Benji is a time traveler.
Whoa. No, it's Ira. How is Ira able to fight Benji if she died a million years ago?
Yeah, I've also seen that as well. That like Ira is a time traveler. I saw someone else write a theory that Ira is like not the person that's inhabiting her body, but like the spirit of the blade is inhabiting the body of this person. I don't know. I get some weird theories that I have to like try and reason, but a lot of them I'm just like, nah. So,
what do you think leads to this? Do you think it's just people and their people love these theories and like coming up with these, like they're trying to find hidden meaning in an actual thing?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is people. I mean, I'm all for people, wanting to engage with the lore of Flesh and Blood and whatnot. But I also think
your dad with Viscera being guy's dad.
I think it's. What was I gonna say? I think a lot of people are trying to justify the function of the card game as well in the lore, but it's okay that there are parts of that where it's separate. Like I've seen also someone said stuff about how because Janus, what you need is a young hero, yet he looks old, that means he's a god. And I was like, no, he's just young because of gameplay purposes.
He's young at heart is what I like to think.
Yeah, young at heart. I did see Goblin Reserve say, well, you haven't proven it wrong, so...
True.
And that's true.
Yeah, once you prove it wrong, then it's no longer canon.
Hey,
it is canon until proven otherwise.
The burden of proof is not on me, it is on you. You came up with the theory.
Oh my goodness.
Checkmate, flat earthers.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, because at the moment, I'm like...
Holy frick.
Viscera and Kasai, father and daughter. Yep. Your dreams, mate. Because I'm making a video at the moment on the side that I'll say what it is.
Vincent's definitely the mom, but go ahead.
Agreed. I'll say what this video is. No one steal this idea because I'd be the first person to make one, I think.
Okay.
I'm making a Flesh and Blood iceberg video.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh.
Yeah,
how long is it going to be?
Lore, no idea yet.
2 hours?
It's going to be about lore and trivia. It's going to be as long as it needs to be, really.
Cool.
So yeah, I've been like on Twitter recently. I was like, yeah, what are some theories you've seen circulating? And most of them, I'm just like, if I talk about in the iceberg, I'm just going to be like, yeah, this is just wrong.
Yeah.
So
okay,
I need theories that have like actual good credit to them, and I'm struggling to find that. So I don't know.
That's kind of cool. One of the things, this isn't lore related, but one of the things that I meant to put in there, if I didn't or if somebody else didn't, was and maybe this is higher up on the iceberg and not as hidden, but like the car. I like the car.
That's going to be
the
on
car
the iceberg.
story. Kevin, you know the car, right? The bonus stage.
What?
The bonus stage.
That's why it's a good topic for the iceberg.
See, this is why it's a good topic for the iceberg. The car.
You keep saying that like it's gonna help me.
So Flesh and Blood's a fighting game, and in Street Fighter, the bonus stage was you punch a car.
Oh,
they used to have a thing at a tournament where there was a car that you'd win the tournament, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you get prizing based on you play a game against an inanimate car. And however much damage you can do it, you get prizing based on it.
Yeah, so
is that kind of it?
If I'm correct on remembering this, I'll be doing proper research.
Okay.
But it was a test. So people who weren't at the calling, I think it was in 2020, might have been 2021. People who weren't at the calling, all we heard was there was some sort of PvE test.
Hank got to hold the car.
Could play.
Oh, that's cool.
Got to hold the car.
He got to hold the car.
Sick.
Might have to get in touch with him.
I've got pictures of the deck actually, because I asked about it somewhat recently. But yeah, there was some sort of PvE test, and certain people got to go and fight this car. It had like 100 health, I think, and you had to try beat it in 3 turns, I want to say. And the car just had like a bunch of like block cards in the deck, life gain,
laughs and fi.
Yeah, but it was all like Street Fighter.
That's cool.
Like artwork on the cards. Pretty cool. Yeah, 3 turns to beat it fully. Yep. So Golden Reserves on that mark. But yeah, cool stuff like that. I'm going to include on the iceberg.
That's super cool. I like the car.
So
see, yeah, Kevin, the car. All right.
Whatever.
All right.
Dude.
Yeah. Frick. Well, thank you for the call.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
Heck yeah. Is there anything you want to shout out? Like our Patreon?
Shout out mac and cheese.
Interesting choice. I appreciate it. It's unique. It's different. We haven't had that yet. I like it.
Yeah. Mac and cheese.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you so much. We'll catch you next time. Next week, same time.
Yep. Catch you, boys.
Sure, see ya. All right. Okay, as we go into... Okay, what's the next topic we're hitting? I don't know. So I made a post... Unless we get another caller in the next minute, I made a post where I asked, what defines a healthy metagame in a TCG?
Yes, that one.
Is it this? I'm just gonna read it. So I was like, is it all decks are playable? Is it the best deck but it's targetable? Is there a best deck but it's targetable? Is it all decks are fun to play as and against? Is it all of those? Is it none of those? Something different? Is it subjective? What is a healthy metagame? We hear about it a lot, and a lot of people have thought for, I don't know, probably not a year now, but for maybe close to a year, people have been saying, it's a healthy metagame we've been having. And then before that, it was pretty contested. Some people would say it was, some people would say it wasn't, like when we had Starvo, Prism, Chain, Viscerai. Like, it was, I don't know. Mac and cheese shout out, let's go. So Kevin, what is a healthy metagame?
I don't know, other than, like, you can, like, I've tried to think about this, and it's like, what do I actually, like, want to, like, what kind of metagame do I want to play, like, type of meta do I want to play in? Do I want to play in anything that's 2-deck probably is just strictly unhealthy. Like, if there's only 2 legal decks, it's probably just not good for the game that it's 2 legal decks, especially with the way, because this question also changes depending on the card game. Because Flesh and Blood, which is very hero-centric, it's going to be unhealthy for the game to have a 2-hero game, because a lot of your players are just not going to enjoy playing that game at that point. So that's not going to be good for people or the game. If there's just strictly a tier 0 deck, that's probably not good unless there's 2 tier 0.5 decks kind of that are trying to fight it.
Tier 1 decks that are
then it becomes
have reason into
like,
it. Like
sure, but like
the best deck, the deck that beats the best deck.
But like, so like Starvo Prism Chain was Starvo best deck, Prism and Chain tier 0.5, and then everything else is tier 2 or below. Like, that's how far apart those decks were.
Yeah.
So it's difficult for me to say just strictly this is a healthy metagame, and instead say, what does an unhealthy metagame look like? It's easier to look at a meta and say, this is unhealthy, this is bad for the game, than it is to just kind of say, this is what we want the meta to look like. Because we were in a meta where there was like 8 competitively viable decks, like top tier competitively viable decks. We had a bunch of events that had 7 different heroes in top 8. That's wild. That's insane.
It is varied. I mean, is it
a game?
Yeah.
For a game where you have like 19 competitively legal heroes, and 7 of them are represented in your top 8.
That is kind of insane. That is super cool.
Wild. It's not like you have 50 different archetypes like Legacy, and you have 7 of them in the top 8. That's just kind of going to happen if you have that many decks to play against and deal with. That's the way that's going to work. But when you have like 7 out of 19, because like 5 of them are pretty widely agreed to just not be there, so then you have like 14 and half of them are represented in the top 8. Like, that's really freaking good. I think at the 20K, no deck had more than 15% representation. That seems pretty good.
That's super cool. That's
like,
super
we can
cool.
Also then, but then we can also look at the Battle Harden that went on at Worlds, the LL one, and you can look at that meta and say pretty definitively it's unhealthy. Because Starvo was like 45% and all of top 8.
So I have 2 points to everything you've just said. One, which I'll get back to. The second one isn't as big. The first one is, so you said defining a healthy metagame is harder than defining what's not a healthy metagame.
Yes.
Want to define it, though. I want it written out. But we'll get back to that. The second point I had was you said a 2-deck meta is probably not a good thing.
Yes.
What about when Ira came out and it was a 1-deck format?
When the game was born?
Yes.
Yeah, the game WTR hadn't been released yet.
Yeah.
No.
Nothing? There's no meta to that.
No, there isn't.
Okay.
There's going to be a strongest strategy.
Okay.
Like if you just took Ira in her card pool now.
Yeah.
There is I would be willing to bet money there is a singularly correct strategy to just play Ira mirrors.
Ooh. So this leads me to what are you doing? We need to find a day. I want to do a stream one day where I play Ira, the Welcome Ira deck, into the Welcome Ira deck.
Okay.
For 24 hours.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I do.
No.
Yes, I do.
You want to do that.
I do.
You don't actually want to.
No,
I want to do that.
We get about 3 hours in, and I'm not going to want to. Yeah. But I want to do it. All right, we'll save that. No one's going to take that idea from me, so I can throw that out into the
No, they're not.
No, they're not. They're just not. All right. So back to my first point, which is I want to define a healthy metagame, right? So, all right, first things first, it's definitely subjective, right?
Yes.
Right? So like
there's going to be a couple things that are going to be pseudo objective because everyone will agree on them, but the majority of it will be subjective.
Yes. Sorry, I'm replying.
Yeah.
The armpit asked why I would want to do that. And I said, I'm a monster.
Yeah.
Because for the same reason I made the deck box, that's why I'd want to do a 24-hour Ira live stream, is because I hate myself. So it's definitely subjective, right? So if you're a pro player and you have a full-time job, like you consider yourself a pro player, but you also have a full-time job. You want to be competitive, you want to do good at events, you are in a testing team, but you also have a full-time job, you might think of a healthier metagame as being like a 3-deck format. I think Arsenal Pass talks about it, like they really like 3-deck form, the deck that beats the deck that beats that deck, or the field rather, like it could be best deck that beats best deck, and then the field beats the deck that beats the best deck.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it's kind of easier to narrow down the best deck, and then you win based on having more reps than other people and just being a generally better player. And you don't have to sacrifice too much time for that kind of stuff, right? Because you have a full-time job or whatever.
I don't think that's strictly a healthier metagame. I think that's the meta they prefer to play for tournaments. That is not the same as it being healthier. That is the competitive. That's the state they want it in for their competitive events, because it's the format they prefer to play. It's the equivalent of wanting to play CC instead of Blitz.
So is a healthy metagame... So how is a healthy metagame subjective, right? If it's not subjective in a sense of what would be most preferred for an individual.
But the argument is not that it is a healthy... Their argument is not that it's a healthy metagame. Their argument is that is the most competitively interesting.
Okay.
That is not the same as saying it is healthy.
Okay.
So I guess then the question becomes... this is the hard part, is what does it mean for a meta to be healthy?
Yes. So What does it mean, right? Okay,
I don't
it's
know.
really hard, right? Okay, so let's
look at a meta and say it is unhealthy because it has these issues. But looking at a meta, like, is it unhealthy or just unhealthy?
So it's so interesting to me. I love this. So like the how do I even say this? You mentioned how a healthy metagame was, I'm going to work backwards. You mentioned how a healthy metagame was, 7 different decks in a top 8 where there was 19 actual decks you could choose from.
Yes.
So you could almost, I think a way you could define healthy in that sense is you had a variety of things you could pick from like a variety of things were viable within a pool where, how do I word this, right? So it was like, it was a small pool to pick from, and yet it was also very varied, the pool that was viable, right? So like a high ratio of variable decks to the amount of decks that could be played.
It's the ratio. So in that case, it's the ratio of available decks to viable decks.
Okay. So is that part of what makes a good healthy metagame, right? So if it was like, 7 of the top 10 decks, but then you have 70 decks that you could pick from, it's harder to tell if it's healthy in that sense because it's more diluted.
I would argue that 7 out of 12 or 13 or 14 or whatever that number was at for the 20K was healthier, and that 14 out of 19, that number as well, is healthier than 7 out of 14 out of 70, or 7 out of 8 out of 70.
So 7 out of 8 is less healthy? Is that what you're saying?
I would argue it is less healthy. I think
because then at that point you're just thinking about every possible deck as opposed to like
7 out of 8 out of 70. So there's just less competitively viable decks, and it happened to be 7 of them made.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that's less
I would
healthy.
argue that is less healthy than 7 out of 14 out of 70.
So is there a way to write that in a way that defines a healthy metagame, right? So like you backtrack and you're like, we're going back to doing like geometry proofs, if anyone's excited about doing math right now, where you're just like...
I would argue, I would argue no more than 20 decks available is where I want to be and I want to see the game, because I think more than that is unreasonable. For one, it's difficult for LSS to balance.
It's also difficult to test.
It's very difficult to test because you start running into situations where individuals cannot test everything. They can't even test everything for one deck. Like for their deck, they can't test everything.
Yeah.
And then teams like maybe can't even test everything.
As someone who doesn't have a lot of free time, and I'm not a professional player by any means, I'm just really excited about the professional scene. I'm a fan. Let's put it that way. I definitely don't have the time to play every single deck in the meta right now, even to like understand what my game plan would be as Bravo. Like I have a good idea on how to look at certain decks, just from having seen other matchups and gameplay and having played the deck a lot. But it's like, I don't even know if I'm going to get... I don't even know if I have the time to like play 3 games of Bravo into Betsy or Bravo into Victor Vincent. And like Vincent, and like understand, okay, it's not just this is my rough game plan, but this is like how actually, my nuanced game plan into Vincent. And feedback. Yeah.
Like if you have to do that for more than 20 decks, you just don't actually have the time to do that.
I think there could be
there's no process that like you don't have that process available, and it doesn't allow for like kind of growth within the meta where people can actually develop their ideas as cleanly, because also like you're going to do that for that first week. Like you're going to go into the first week of RTNs and have a bunch of ideas and have stuff ready to go. And then you're going to play against a bunch of people who have completely different ideas. and you're both going to completely change afterwards, probably.
Yeah. It's so
like then like that evolution actually getting to be there, where you have some concrete idea that you get to take in, and then but not so little that everyone is already set.
Oh my god!
By the time that first week of RTNs rolls around.
Ooh, it's so good.
It's a tough balance. It is.
It is. It's
which
so
is why I
crazy.
like that. It's like 20, like probably like 2013, 6 to 7 is like the numbers I'm looking at. Is like ideal.
I think you could, like, if we sat here for like another 2 hours, we could pin down better numbers, like 19 as opposed to 20 or something like that. But like, there's almost no point to that. So I guess
there isn't.
The next point I was gonna make was,
which even then, the top 8 numbers are going to vary the most. Like they're going to vary a lot.
Yeah,
you're going to have some top 8s that only have 4 heroes in them.
Yeah,
but that can still be indicative of a healthy meta when you look at top 16, top 32, top 64.
Okay, next question. Does a healthy meta have... okay, so, yeah, roughly... Okay, deck? Yeah, roughly... Okay, let's actually... Wait, let me ask this question to wrap this up. So about 20 decks probably in the available pool, and then you said, what, 7, and then... Or how'd you say?
13 in
for...
the, like, competitively viable where you can play for top 8s.
Yeah.
Not you're going to consistently get there, because that's not possible. You can't actually put 13 decks.
You can't just
tier
make
1.
it. Yeah. And then about 7 in top 8.
If you're seeing 5+ heroes, 5+ different heroes in your top 8s, that's good.
Yeah.
I think.
I'm just also writing this down.
Yeah.
For myself. So, and then the next question I have is a best deck in the meta? Does a healthy meta have a best deck, or does it not have a best deck, or does it depend?
I think you can't have I don't think it's possible to have a healthy meta with a tier 0 deck. I will say that.
It's kind of bold. And most metas in most games have tier 0 decks. Like, it's hard to not have them. It's hard to not have them.
Yes, I absolutely agree. It is difficult to not have them. That doesn't mean it's good to have one.
True. And it can also not feel awful, right? So, like...
It can. Yeah.
Like, Lexi
was
not awful.
So you can have... Yes, but
and she wasn't really
I would argue
tier 0.
Lexi was not tier 0.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
There's a difference between best deck and tier 0. Because when you look at LL, when on release, Starvo was tier 0 and everyone else was tier 2.
Yeah.
That's the extreme.
Yeah.
That's absolutely the extreme. But
oh man.
I think they LL might actually be in a pretty good spot right now where there isn't Starvo might be the best deck, but he is like not tier 0. He might not, I don't think he's even tier 0.5. He probably loses to OG Prism, but not by much. LL's a weird format right now.
Yeah. I have another.
All the Rune Blades come back. I don't even know what those look like. Lexi's showing up now. Like, I think you can have a best deck and have a healthy meta, because I would argue that Lexi post Bracers ban was best deck, and that was still a relatively healthy meta where the other decks, you still had like 7 decks that were competing.
Yeah.
Because you still had Dromai, Icelander, Briar.
Yeah.
In that meta. You also had Dash. I think Dash was doing all right, but I'm not 100% sure. She might have been down a little bit by the end of it. Fi was doing okay.
Yeah.
Bravo was still there, doing fine.
Yeah, Bravo was fine. Fine enough.
That was not the healthiest meta, but it was far from the unhealthiest.
Yeah, it was still fine. It was definitely not an unhealthy meta. You could just be okay. You could just have a fine meta.
Yeah, that was a totally fine meta. It was you had that meta, those metas that have best decks have some benefits for players in that it's very clear what you have to do. Like it's interesting because there's two options here. It's have a meta where it's very clear what you have to do, and have a meta where you are completely free to do whatever you want.
Is that right?
And
is it both of those?
You can,
or is it one of them?
For what? The Lexi meta?
No, I mean just like in general.
Those are different.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Because I would argue the Lexi meta was significantly more towards it's very clear what you have to do.
Yeah.
Or it is clear what you have to do.
That's not healthy.
In Starvo meta, it's clear what you have to do and you don't have any freedom. Like it's a sliding scale
of
how much freedom you have so and what you have to do.
Lexi could be like a
Lexi
I don't know,
was right
like
about
like a 5.
Lexi meta was she was right about in the middle where it was clear what you had to do. You had to be able to deal with Lexi, but you had options to do.
You could do your own thing.
Options to do it.
Yeah.
You could play Icelander. It was rough. You could play it.
Yeah.
You could play Dromai. You could play Bravo. You could play Lexi.
Yeah.
You could play Ice Lexi into it.
So my next go ahead.
Post Icelander, post Worlds, we ended up in a meta where it's very much you can do what you want.
Yeah. Which is super cool.
Yes.
Which
I think we're gonna even be in that meta even more.
It's interesting. I'm
even wider.
I'm so excited about this. Especially
it
like
might have 15 plus like top 8able heroes.
Yeah. I like how varied some of these tier lists are, because I think it shows that
there's no agreement. There's no consensus because the set isn't freaking out yet.
Get them. All right. Okay. My next question.
Where the set's legal to play? Freaking New Zealand. That's it. I guess Europe.
Wait. Oh, it is legal. Okay. So
it is Friday.
Next question.
Guess what? All these heckin' tier lists are basically out of the U.S.
Okay.
We're bozos.
Do all competitive decks need to be fun to play as and against to be a healthy meta? Like, let's say, we talked about that sliding scale. Let's say it's a 10 out of 10 healthy meta. Are all decks fun to play as and against? I actually know the answer to this question.
I think
I looked it up. It was on Wikipedia.
The issue comes from the issue with your question is that the idea of fun is subjective.
Ding, ding, ding. That's correct. 10 points.
The actual question here, I think, is, or the way that I actually like, and I mean, this is like a given answer. It's like the healthiest metagame is the one where there's the least non-games in the format among the like 13 to 14 pool.
How many non-games can you have?
I don't know, but as few as possible.
Other games like Magic do best of 3s to mitigate the non-games, right?
That's because they have inherent variance that leads to non-games, not because of balancing issues.
That's a good point.
That's a distinction I want to make here for variance inherent in the game and balancing issues. There should be as few non-games as possible due to balancing issues.
I'm writing it down.
And
go ahead.
It is going to be inherent that you have some number of them. That's unavoidable. It is. Like, Arachne just existed for a year and a half.
Poor Arachne. The problem is he still exists. Like, they didn't take him out back.
And he got a nice buff, but it's not going to be enough. Yeah. And he's still just an absolute dog to Dromai. Like,
that's his buff he needs. He needs Dromai to go away.
Yeah, actually, a lot of decks do. Yeah. I'm not kidding.
I think Brian said
I played Icelander.
Yeah. I think Brian understands.
Icelander to leave.
Yeah. I think Brian talked about how Dromai is the last of the Fab.
That was a panel at Worlds.
Yeah.
It was the last of James White, Fab. Brian Gottlieb, and one other guy. Where it's like the no free action points.
It's probably he's like the host of Flesh and Blood. So
yeah, he was the one hosting it.
I believe that.
Yeah.
So how many? Let's say I'm playing 10 games of Flesh and Blood in a healthy metagame, and I'm playing a competitive. Let's say 100 games, and I'm playing insert top 13 deck into insert top 13, or let's say day 1 top 13, day 2 of a calling. Yeah. How many non-games should I have? Let's say I play 100 games in my Swiss of the day 2 calling. Zero. That's a healthy. That's the 10 out of 10 metagame is 0.
So you add an issue with this, which is it's day 2 of a calling. The decks that have non-games
day
are
one.
out.
Day one. Because I don't want a non-game from like I'm good at the game. They're not good at the game. Balance based non-game.
Equally skilled opponents. You both know your decks. You're not. Yeah. You're not having to play your opponent's deck for them. They're not having to play yours for you.
Yes.
And it's 100 games spread across the meta. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Yes. Across the 13 competitive decks.
Should have, if it's just like strictly from balancing stuff, you should have probably like, if I'm going to put a number on healthy, you should have 5 or less.
I was going to say 5.
I think honestly in Flesh and Blood in the 13, in a metagame without Dromai, you probably have closer to 2.
Oh. But Bravo's in the game.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't think that was going to be your answer. Wow, that's actually because decks like maybe I'm biased, but I think like Guardians just feel like they have auto wins against certain decks, and maybe that's not true. No.
Who?
Ask Tim. I don't know.
So Guardian versus Dory. Yeah.
That's no, maybe not that one. Because that one's like, I mean. Man,
that's very dependent on
where's my tier list
skill level of both the pilots.
True. Yes, it absolutely is. And not just like
you
from
have a lot of non-games if you're roughly the same skill level in that matchup as your opponent, or you're going to have some really interesting games.
You're going to have some really interesting games. Let me think. What is like a non-game, right? Like
Prism Dromai is like the most non-game, or here Prism Guardian right now.
Oh my gosh, yes, Prism exists, but I was also thinking like Bravo Dashio might be more of a non-game.
Dio might have the roughest matchup in Bravo.
Yeah.
Or Victor right now.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, so you might have rougher matchups, but in general, you're not having non-games for balance.
We're struggling to figure out some non-games.
We are, actually. We're like digging. I'm like having to look up heroes. You know what? Actually, it's Kano into everyone except Prism, because Kano just auto wins.
How fast would you have said anything to do with Prism Guardian?
Yeah.
In like Leo meta 2 years ago.
Yep. It's immediate. Or like you say, Briar versus the field, right? So it's like
Briar versus the field is just 60-40 into everything.
Oh my gosh. It's so dominant.
Starvo into everything.
Okay. That's I like this. Okay, so the definition we have so far is the meta needs go ahead.
Like this is I think this is a really freaking good meta for and here I'll put a little bit of the definition to healthy. It's good for the game. It's good for
vague. That's so vague.
I'll be specific.
Okay, all right.
You have the most people wanting to play and able to play the hero they want to play, not the hero they feel like they need to play.
Unless they're playing Teklevasen.
Yes, the least people possible are being shoehorned into heroes they don't want to play and still feel like they have a chance to compete. Because even then,
write that down.
You had a Riptide in top 16 of the 20K at Realm, and you had a Riptide in top 16 of the 10K.
That was so well put, actually. I'm blown away. Holy frick. That's good. Like, okay. All right. So
like, Riptide is like almost universally agreed to be in like the lowest tier of hero.
Oh, except for
like,
my tier
list.
list.
This is the closest at tier 1, the top of tier 1 and the bottom. This is the closest at the top of tier 1 and the bottom of tier 3 have ever been.
Yeah. Other than Dromai. And it's like,
as soon as Dromai's gone, like,
okay,
it's ridiculous.
So some people think about this and they think about, well, okay, I'm going to go back and read this real quick. So like the notes I have here is the meta needs to be testable and bounceable. So it needs to be a lower number, but not nothing. So our numbers were roughly 20 available decks, 13 competitive decks, 5 plus decks you should see in big event top 8s. On average.
I'm not going to say that that's like exactly the way it works out, because all those top 8s are going to be locally
you could have a top 8 that's just 3 heroes, but you could have a top 8 that's all 8 different heroes.
And like you can have an event like Battle Hard in Pittsburgh where there's like 10 Reinars, but that's because 9 of them are all from Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Okay, like, so also there's no tier 0. And you're looking for little to none non-games based on balance. And so this is like 5 out of 100 games at worst. So that's concise. Like, I feel like I could like present that. That feels really good. And I like the expression you made earlier where you were talking about however you described it, where the most amount of people got to play the deck that they want to play and didn't feel like, and it was still competitively viable. Yeah.
People don't feel shoehorned, or as few people as possible feel shoehorned into playing a deck they don't want to play.
This is good
to compete.
I like this. And then there was a point I was going to bring up, but I stopped so I could do, or you were going to bring up, one of us was going to bring up, and then I stopped to read that and I forgot what it was.
I think I'm good.
All right. You can catch that later in the VOD, I guess. All right. So I think we're going to wrap it up from here. Is that right? Anything you can think of?
I think I'm cool with that.
All right. So it's a healthy meta right now until Dromai leaves? Or, I mean, it's a healthy meta after she leaves? Oh, that was the point I was going to bring up.
Oh.
Dromai leaves. It could be reminiscent to, like, older formats where it was all mid-rangey, like, you know, the boomers of Fab who were just like reminiscing on the old WTR, Arcane Rising.
WTR.
Yeah, and they're just like every deck was mid-range. Is it a chance it gets stale? In that sense, like
yes. So this
you can play.
This goes like,
let's say we have this perfect metagame, right? Does it get stale because you know there's no best deck? You don't necessarily have to tech for a certain thing. You just kind of play your game. Your gameplay. I think a little bit. Other gameplays.
Yeah. So like I think a little bit, because you get if the meta is too wide, this goes to like if you have more than 13.
Yeah.
If you're like approaching like 16, 17, 18 out of 19 or 20 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You reach a point where you can't prepare for what your opponent is doing, because you can't prepare for everyone.
Yeah. But does it get like...
So then it probably does become, you just have your strategy, your number strategy, and you and your opponent are just numbers at each other.
Kind of like you talked about Legacy earlier, where there's like a huge number of types of decks in Legacy, and you just have your game plan, and then you have cards that counter things that counter your gameplay, right? And it's almost like everyone's playing their own. They're playing different decks, and the decks do different things, and it can be aggro and control or whatever. But it almost feels like
all the same approach.
It's all the same approach in the sense that it kind of feels like a combo deck, where it's you have your reason to win, and your ways to stop people to stop you from winning.
Yes.
And then maybe ways to stop people from winning. I don't know.
That can become an issue in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
Because the game is very numbers based. Like, it's so dangerously numbers based that you need things that break the math. This goes like all the way back to like like this goes all the way back to like the conversation in the first episode of Nathan. I keep bringing it up because it's just so freaking
so good.
Part of what actually makes you have a meta is you have ways that people break the math.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just, if it reaches that point, it actually, like if you have 15 viable decks, you probably actually don't have 15 viable decks. You probably actually have like 2, which are all just the best numbers.
So also to add into the healthy metagame, it needs to be kind of like, I keep thinking of League of Legends. I've been watching a lot of League of Legends esports lately, so I keep thinking of League of Legends. And I'm twice this episode, I've stopped myself from using an analogy that involved League of Legends. So you're welcome.
Yeah.
But to wrap this up with an analogy using League of Legends, my point is they change the game up every 2 weeks. You get a new patch, something else is broken, and does a healthy metagame requires change up enough to where you don't figure out the meta or something like that, maybe like something to break the ice, break the ice. That's
sort
the
of
expression I'm looking for.
Yeah. To break the like stalemate.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd put it that way, but you need decks to play on different axes.
Okay. Yeah.
Because if
like Kano
that's
versus
the reason
Prism
that I think
versus Bravo versus Phi, they're all doing different things.
Yes.
Okay.
They're playing different games. And then you have Icelander in there who's playing another game. And then you have Dromai, who's doing something similar to Prism, but still different, and you interact with it differently.
Does a healthy metagame need a best deck every once in a while? Like a long term, like over the course of like, let's say 3 years, you have a best deck pop up for like 3 months or 4 months, 5 months.
I think it's inevitable.
Ooh.
I think it probably is a sign of a healthy game, even if it's not a sign of a healthy meta.
So interesting. I love this. I love digging deep on this. I think we'll leave a cliffhanger there and let everyone think about that one, because it's at this point we'll just be talking for the next 5 hours, right?
Yeah, it's just going to be a podcast.
We've tried to wrap this up like 3 times now, so look at us.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually wrap this up. Do you have anything else you want to shout out? Anything you want to talk about? You got anything going on with you?
Watch Hartford this weekend.
Watch you on stream at Hartford this weekend when you're crushing it. Maybe. In the Battle Hardened.
We'll that's not going to be on screen.
Oh, that's not. Also, yes, good point.
That I also want to play day 2 of the Calling, so I don't want to play the Battle Hardened.
That's what I was trying to dog you on. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye.